You ever have that one person in your family who can do the dumbest thing possible, but somehow everyone still acts like they're a genius? That was my stepbrother. For as long as I can remember, he had this weird ability to make people believe he was smarter, more capable and more creative than everyone else in the room. Not because he actually was, but because he was loud. He was confident, and he always said everything like it was already a fact. Meanwhile, I was the opposite. I wasn't the kind of person who talked over everyone or tried to be the center of attention. I usually just kept to myself, did things right, and let the results speak for themselves. Apparently in my family, that meant people ignored me until they needed something fixed. And that's exactly why this whole thing happened. Last summer, our town had this big community event. It was one of those local festival-type things where everybody shows up. There are food stands, little games, music, and a bunch of community booths trying to get people to stop by. My mom signed our family up to help run one of the activity booths. At first, it sounded simple. All we had to do was come up with some kind of game or attraction that people would actually want to participate in. Nothing huge. Just something fun, easy to understand, and organized enough that families wouldn't walk away after 10 seconds. The second my mom brought it up, everybody started throwing out terrible ideas. My stepbrother wanted to do something complicated with prizes, timers, and multiple rounds like we were running some kind of game show. One of my younger cousins wanted to just hand out candy and call it a day. Somebody else suggested a guessing game that barely made sense. And while everybody else was talking over each other, I actually sat there and thought about what would work. I started thinking about the kind of stuff people usually stop for at those events. It has to be quick. It has to be easy. It has to look fun from a distance. And it has to be simple enough that a kid can understand it in like 5 seconds. So I came up with a game that checked all those boxes. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart. It was a simple challenge game that people could play fast. There could be small prizes, and the rules were easy enough that there wouldn't be confusion. I even thought through how the booth should be set up so the line would move smoothly. I made a list in my notes app with everything we needed. Supplies, basic setup, rules, prize ideas, even backup plans in case too many people showed up at once. I didn't just come up with an idea. I basically built the whole thing before anyone else had stopped arguing. Later that night, when everyone was in the kitchen, I explained it. And at first, my mom actually looked interested. One of my aunts said it sounded organized. But before I could fully finish, my stepbrother cut in and started laughing. He said, "That's it? That's your big idea? That sounds way too basic." Then he started talking like he was some kind of event planner. He said the booth needed to be bigger, louder, more competitive, and more impressive. Of course, the second he said that, people started nodding, because that's what always happened. He could say absolutely anything with confidence, and people would act like he had cracked some secret code. So my idea got brushed aside. Nobody asked to see the notes. Nobody asked how it would actually work. They just moved on because he made fun of it first. And honestly, I should have expected it. That had basically been the story of my life around him. If I said something, it got ignored. If he repeated it louder 10 minutes later, suddenly it was brilliant. So I let it go. Or at least I pretended to. 2 days later, we were all sitting in the living room trying to finalize plans. And that's when this dude did the most predictable thing possible. He cleared his throat, acted like he had just had some massive breakthrough, and started pitching my exact idea, not a similar idea. Not inspired by my idea, my exact idea. Same game, same basic rules, same setup, same reason it would work. He even used some of the same wording I had used when I explained it the first time. And suddenly, everybody loved it. My mom smiled and said that was perfect. My aunt said it was clever. Another family member said, "See, now that makes sense." I just sat there staring at him thinking, "Are you serious right now?" He didn't even look at me. Not once. That's the part that made it worse. If he had looked embarrassed, or guilty, or even slightly awkward, maybe I would have said something, but no. He acted completely comfortable, like it had always been his idea. Like I had never said anything at all. I thought about calling him out right there. I really did. But I already knew exactly how it would go. He'd deny it. Everybody would tell me not to make it into a big deal. Someone would say we were basically thinking the same thing. And somehow I would end up being the problem for speaking up. So I stayed quiet. But in my head, I made a decision. I was done helping. If everyone wanted to treat him like the genius behind the booth, then fine. He could be the genius. He could handle the setup. He could explain the rules. He could run the whole thing. I wasn't going to save him when it fell apart. The week before the event, my family kept talking about how great his plan was. That part was honestly kind of unreal. Every time someone mentioned the booth, they acted like he was single-handedly carrying the whole thing. Meanwhile, I was the one who still had the actual supply list. I was the one who knew how much space we needed. I was the one who had already thought through how to avoid bottlenecks. If too many kids showed up, but because he had claimed the idea, everybody assumed he had all that covered too. He didn't. Not even close. A few days before the event, my mom asked if we were all set, and my stepbrother said, "Yeah, I've got it." That was it. No list, no details, no planning, just confidence. And somehow that was enough for everyone. The morning of the event, we got there early to set up the booth. The park was already packed with people dragging coolers, folding chairs and strollers across the grass. There were food trucks lined up on one side, music playing from a stage in the distance, and rows of booths stretching across the field. For a second, I actually thought maybe he'd surprise me. Maybe he had prepared more than I realized. Maybe he had secretly done the work. Then we opened the supply bins, and I immediately knew we were cooked. Half the stuff we needed wasn't there. Some of the materials he brought made no sense. A few things were duplicates of items we only needed one of. And some of the most important stuff just flat out wasn't packed. My mom asked where the rest of it was. He shrugged and said, "I thought somebody else grabbed it." Nobody had. Because nobody else even knew what was supposed to be there. That was his job. Then came the setup. I'm not even kidding when I say he managed to make a simple booth look confusing. He put the table in the wrong place, set the prizes where people couldn't see them, blocked the entry side so no one knew where to stand, and arranged everything in a way that guaranteed people would bump into each other. I watched this happen in silence. Part of me wanted to step in, but a bigger part of me remembered exactly how my basic idea got laughed at. So I just stood there and let the so-called expert work. Once the event officially started, people began walking by. A few families slowed down because the prizes caught their attention. Kids pointed at the booth. Parents came closer. And every single time somebody asked how the game worked, my stepbrother somehow made it sound harder than it was. He over-explained everything. Then he changed the rules halfway through his explanation. Then he added details that were never supposed to be part of it. At one point, a little kid looked up at his mom and said, "I don't get it." And honestly, that summed up the whole booth. Nobody got it, because he didn't know how to explain something he had never actually planned. The line never formed right. People would walk up, listen, get confused, and leave. Sometimes they'd start playing and then stop because the instructions changed. A couple parents asked the same question, twice because his answer made no sense the first time. And every time that happened, he'd start talking faster, like more words would somehow fix the problem. It didn't. It just made everything worse. After maybe 30 minutes of this mess, my family started noticing. My aunt quietly asked him if everything was okay. My mom started rearranging small stuff on the table because even she could tell it looked off. One of my cousins kept trying to hand out prizes at random because nobody knew when someone had actually won. It was chaos. And the craziest part was that all of this was completely avoidable. This should have been easy. That's what was killing me. The entire reason my original version would have worked was because it was simple. But he had taken something clean and easy and turned it into a confusing disaster just so he could look important. Then came the moment that ended him. A parent walked up with two kids and asked, very politely, "Can you explain how they play?" That should have been the easiest question in the world. He opened his mouth and gave one answer. Then one of the kids asked a follow-up question, and suddenly he gave a different answer. Then my aunt tried to help, and he corrected her with a third version. By this point, even the parent looked confused. The kids were just standing there waiting, and there was this long, awkward pause where everyone at the booth realized the same thing at the same time. He had no clue what he was doing. The parent finally said, "So what are the actual rules?" And instead of just admitting he messed up, my stepbrother did the most annoying thing possible. He pointed at me and said, "Well, he was supposed to help more." I almost laughed, because that was such a desperate move. You steal somebody's idea, take full credit for it, refuse to let them help, and then the second you embarrass yourself, suddenly it's their fault? Wild. My mom turned and looked at me, not angry, just confused. Then she asked, right there in front of everybody, "Wait, do you know how this was supposed to work?" And that was the opening. I said, yeah, just that, yeah. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and showed her the original plan. The full list, the setup, the rules, the supplies, everything. I explained exactly how the booth was supposed to be arranged, where people were meant to enter, how the game should be introduced in one sentence, how prizes were supposed to be handled, how the line should move, how to keep it simple so younger kids wouldn't get confused. And as I was explaining it, I could literally watch everybody's faces change. First confusion, then realization, then that awkward moment when people start replaying every earlier conversation in their heads and realizing what actually happened. My aunt asked, "Wait, when did you make this?" I told her I wrote it all down the same night I first brought up the idea. My mom looked from my phone to my stepbrother and just went quiet. He tried to interrupt and say we had both worked on it. That was a lie. And the worst part for him was that nobody even jumped in to back him up, because now that they were seeing the notes, the planning, and the details, it was obvious. He hadn't created anything. He had stolen a rough version of my idea, ignored the actual planning, and then acted shocked when it collapsed. So my mom told me to take over. Not later, not after discussing it. Immediately. Just, "Can you run it?" I said yes. I moved the table, reorganized the supplies that were actually there, simplified the explanation, set the prizes where people could see them, created an obvious place for the line to start. And within minutes, the difference was obvious. Families were stopping. Kids understood the rules right away. People were actually finishing the game. Prizes were being handed out the right way. Instead of confused silence, there was laughter. Instead of people walking away, they stayed. The booth finally looked like it was supposed to. And my stepbrother, he completely faded into the background. He stood off to the side, pretending to be busy, but he barely spoke. Nobody was asking him for input anymore. Nobody was praising him. Nobody was calling him creative. Now they were all asking me questions. My aunt thanked me for fixing it. One of the parents said the booth was a lot of fun. Even my mom admitted the setup made way more sense the way I had originally planned it. That part felt good. Not gonna lie. Not even because I wanted to humiliate him. I just wanted, for once, for people to see what had actually happened. And they finally did. The rest of the event went smoothly. The booth stayed busy almost the whole time. Kids kept coming back with friends. Parents were smiling. And the same family members who had ignored me earlier were suddenly acting like I had always been an important part of the plan. Funny how that works. After everything was packed up, the ride home was quiet. Way quieter than usual. My stepbrother barely said a word. No jokes. No fake confidence. Nothing. And I think the reason he was so quiet was because he knew this time he couldn't talk his way out of it. Everybody had seen it happen in real time. They saw him take credit. They saw him fail. And they saw me fix it. Later that night, my mom came to my room and said she should have listened to me from the start. She said she didn't realize I had planned out that much. I told her that was kind of the problem. Nobody ever realizes it because nobody listens the first time. She didn't really have an answer to that. And honestly, I wasn't expecting one. But at least she knew. Since then, my stepbrother hasn't tried stealing my ideas again. Or at least not in such an obvious way. Turns out it's a lot harder to act like the smartest person in the room when everyone has already seen. What happens the second you're expected to prove it? And the funniest part of the whole thing? The idea he mocked for being too basic ended up being the only reason that booth didn't completely fail. So yeah, he stole my idea, took the credit, ignored the planning, ruined the whole thing in front of everyone, and then had to stand there while I saved the exact mess he created.